Dragnet.
Look at those eyebrows.
Dragnet.
All right, enough of that. What am I doing, folks? Dude, I swear I'm in a graduate program, and it's a very professional, I guess, program, and everyone's super professional. And I'm sure if they knew that I was doing YouTube videos in my basement, the amount of scoffs I would get for it would be kind of hilarious in my opinion. But I do it for you guys, and I do it for myself too, because I like doing this shit. Dragnet, continuing with the theme of commenter recommended movies. This one was recommended by a viewer called Pure Hangout. Now, Pure Hangout has a channel of his own. I'll link it down below. And I've been watching a lot of his shit. He's been watching a lot of my shit. We've been going back and forth. I feel like we're both the same kind of film fan-ish. We like film history to a certain extent and stuff like that. We don't really dig into recent movies as much as we look at older movies and stuff like that. So it's really been cool interacting with Pure Hangout, and I really like his shit. He's a really funny dude. He's got the big twirly mustache, which I like that. Yeah, and I asked him if he could review this movie with me, which is why I brought out my little computer here. Pure Hangout is going to do a review of this movie with me. He's going to help me out here. The one thing me and Pure Hangout we disagree on is the Oscars. I think they're a pile of poop, but he takes it with a bit more legitimacy, which I can respect. I'm a bit of a cold sack of shit sometimes. It's a bit on me, I guess. But, okay, other than that, let's talk about the movie. So, Dragnet is about Dan Aykroyd and Tom Hanks. They are cops, and they're trying to solve the mystery surrounding this certain cult that is run by what's his fucking face? Christopher Plummer, good Canadian boy. Also dead, rest in peace. But, yeah, so Dragnet, Dan Aykroyd, and Tom Hanks are trying to solve this mystery. Dan Aykroyd is your straight guy here, and Tom Hanks is a bit of the loosey-goosey guy here. Alright, that's my summary of the movie. There's one thing I hate doing on this channel is summarizing the movie, but I know I have to do it. I just want to jump right into it. Let's talk about Dan Aykroyd. Dan Aykroyd. I've never reviewed a Dan Aykroyd movie on this channel. Not that I know of, which is surprising because Blues Brothers is one of my favorite movies of all time.
Things that make us all the same. You, me, them, everybody. Everybody.
Everybody needs somebody to love.
Someone to love. Someone to love.
Alright, enough of that. So Dan Aykroyd, I think he's a very interesting performer. When you look at the people on SNL, that early cast, people like Chevy Chase, Bill Murray, who else? John Belushi. I feel like as performers, they don't stand out as much as a Dan Aykroyd. They all kind of have their own thing, but I feel like Dan Aykroyd, he's such a precise and micro-focused performer, and that really shows through the way he performs. I remember, the most famous clip of Dan Aykroyd is when he was on Weekend Update, and he's doing the news, and he says, "Jane, you ignorant slut!" That's a line only Dan Aykroyd can deliver, and it's because of that precision he has. You give that line to Chevy Chase, it kind of becomes frat douchey. Same thing if you give it to a John Belushi or a Bill Murray. But Dan Aykroyd knows how to deliver that line to make the joke about him rather than the word slut. Which makes Dan Aykroyd a very interesting performer in my opinion. He really understands comedy, and he reads it on a different level, I find anyway. And I feel like people don't give Dan Aykroyd that much credit when people remember that early cast. I feel like they go back to Bill Murray more, or even a John Belushi, because I feel like he died prematurely, and that kind of changes people's perspective on him. They view him, changes their perspective on him. Not only do I find him a very interesting performer, I really think he's an interesting writer. He's written a lot of his own movies. He's written movies like Spies Like Us, Blues Brothers, like I mentioned before. Ghostbusters was his passion project. What else has he written? Well, he's written Dragnet. So that's what I'm going to be reviewing. And just like he is a very specific performer, he's also a very specific writer. A lot of the times when you write a comedy, a lot of the plot falls away to the wayside. A lot of the character development as well. Dan Aykroyd's not like that. And there's a reason why movies like Blues Brothers and Ghostbusters picked up so much steam, and it's because the characters are really good. The dynamic between the 3 or 4 characters in Ghostbusters, I forgot Ernie Hudson, sorry. Who doesn't, though? The 4 characters in Ghostbusters, it's a really good dynamic you got going on there. And the plot itself in Ghostbusters was really interesting as well. And there's a reason why people bought Ghostbusters merch after the movie came out, because you remember like the ectoplasm, the car, the fucking the slimy monster. I'm not that big into Ghostbusters like most people, I'm sorry. What was his name? Slimer. There we go. Yeah, he really pays attention to the movie. He doesn't just say, let's just give the audience what they want and give them some laughs and they'll go on their way. He really wants to pay attention to that. And I think that's his forte, but it also happens to be his biggest weakness. When I hear stories of Blues Brothers, in case you guys didn't know, I'm a huge Blues Brothers fan. It's probably one of my favorite comedies ever made. If you guys look at my earlier videos, I had like a poster of Blues Brothers in the background. Apparently, when he gave the script to Blues Brothers, to the producer or the director, I can't remember who, it was a 6-hour script. And they're like, we can't film this. And he was like, oh, it's going to be a 2-parter. It's going to be a 2-parter, and you got a backstory for every character. The trumpet guy gets a backstory. And it was like, that's what I mean. He's like a very, he really likes the lore of his movies, which again is his forte and it's also his weakness. But sometimes, in the case of Ghostbusters, you had someone like Harold Ramis who would kind of rein the horse in a bit. And in the case of Blues Brothers, you had a great director like John Landis who directed that movie and knew what to leave in and what to cut out. And sometimes Dan Aykroyd will just be like unleashed and no one's there to like say, hold your horses there, boy. And then you get movies like, I feel like Spies Like Us. I know a lot of people like that movie. I feel like it gets way too convoluted towards the end. And even a movie like Nothing But Trouble, I think that was the name. Where it's just like, okay, this is a bit too wild and crazy, and like Dan Aykroyd, you gotta like bring it back a bit. So where does Dragnet land on this scale? I think this movie is the same problem I had with a movie like Spies Like Us, which was also written by Dan Aykroyd. The first half of this movie is excellent. I love the first half of this movie. But when the plot starts to kick in, it becomes a little too plot heavy, and the laughs start becoming a little fewer and fewer, and all of a sudden it becomes less about the dynamic between Tom Hanks and Dan Aykroyd. It starts becoming more about this huge conspiracy cult going on with Christopher Plummer. That's the problem I have with this movie. But that first half is gold. Great lines in this movie. I love when he pulls up to the Playboy Mansion. They don't call it the Playboy Mansion, but it's kind of low-key deduced. He pulls up to the Playboy Mansion, and the girl says, "Is this the vibrator repairman? Thank God you're here." Great line. I love the opening line of this movie. This movie opens with a great line from the narrator. Also, I love the ending. That ending is so beautiful. So this whole time, Dan Aykroyd falls in love with a virgin, and they constantly refer to this girl as the virgin, which is kind of funny. But at the end, they refer to her as virgin one more time, and Dan Aykroyd just like lifts his eyebrow like that. It's such perfection. And the one thing I really thought was interesting in this movie, in that first half of the movie, was the dynamic between Dan Aykroyd and Tom Hanks. Now, we've seen so many buddy cop movies and stuff like that. We know the dynamic. You got the straight cop, and you got the cop that's a little more unleashed. And the cop that's a little more unleashed tends to be the comic relief, while the straight cop is there to drive the plot. Here, the dynamic is a bit different, and that's what I really thought was interesting about the movie. Here, the joke was that the straight cop is the goofball, and the one who's like more by the hip, played by Tom Hanks, he's the one that's like more normal to an audience member. And I thought that was a really interesting thing. The way Dan Aykroyd delivers dialogue in this movie, it's like no one fucking, like, no one thinks like this. There's like this part where he's driving on the highway and he's going at 55 miles an hour, and Tom Hanks says, you know, you can go a little faster. And he says that he's trying to save on the taxpayers' taxes to, it's just shit like that. It really was interesting that they decided to make the straight guy the comic relief instead of making, like, the loosey-goosey guy the comic relief. But, yeah, I like that dynamic. I liked certain moments in this movie. I just feel like that last third gets a little too plot heavy. We forget about these characters a little. That's just my thoughts on it. I want to see what Pure Hangout has to say about this. Let's go check out my friend Pure Hangout.
Oh, there you are, Garage Movie Club. Paul, thank you so much for checking out one of my favorite movies of all time, Dragnet. This is a very early movie for me. I was like about 4, I think, when it came out. I didn't see it in theaters or anything, but I saw it, you know, shortly after it was available to watch. And our discussion sort of about this movie started like with your review of The Burbs. When he talked about The Burbs, family movie he grew up watching, I was like, yeah, this is, you know, you should watch Dragnet. It's similar. It's, you know, family movie, and Tom Hanks is in it, and he's really funny, just like in The Burbs. You got to check this out. But I'm finding with a lot of these movies that I grew up watching, thinking they were family movies, they may not be considered family movies to everybody because a lot of the content in it. But I think my parents were just so young when they had me, they didn't want some kid, you know, dictating what gets watched, so they were going to watch whatever they wanted to watch. Not that this movie is not a family movie, like in a solid way. I think it could be. A lot of the things that you wouldn't want kids watching went over my head, and it just, you know, it's funny for a kid. I grew up loving it, you know, and I was very, very young when I watched it. And it was definitely one of the stepping stones to making Tom Hanks my favorite actor of all time. So the history behind Dragnet, it started out as a radio show like in the late 40s, then moved on to television, and there were like 2 shows that happened. There was like a break basically, and it was all created by Jack Webb. He did the voice of Joe Friday on the radio show, and then he played Joe Friday on the television show, and there was also like a movie mixed in there, and it's just a police procedural. And this movie here from 1987 is sort of like a sequel to all of that, but where the show and the radio show were police dramas aiming for realism, this movie does not do that. It is a police comedy, and it really doesn't hit the drama notes that the Dragnet of the Past does. I mean, Dan Aykroyd is in it, a young Tom Hanks who is, you know, doing mostly funny stuff at this point. Philadelphia hadn't come out yet. But I think it serves as a nice way to approach the subject matter, because you can kind of poke fun of it a little bit, because, you know, this is a very different time period. So when they're paying homage, it's almost sort of in a humorous way, because Dan Aykroyd is playing Joe Friday's nephew, and he's also named Joe Friday. But where Joe Friday in the old television show was straight-laced, but like a tough guy, sort of had like almost a Humphrey Bogartness to him, Dan Aykroyd's not doing that. He's a straight-laced guy who is very nerdy. When I was a kid, Tom Hanks was definitely my favorite character in this movie as Pep. Is his name Pep? I don't know what that's short for, though. I don't think it's mentioned in the movie. I think of pepperoni when I hear Pep. But what I love about Dan Aykroyd in this is he has like very complicated dialogue. It's just thick police jargon is being spoken, and I've just come to really appreciate that and think it's absolutely hilarious. And just skill. It's amazing craft or skill to be able to speak the way he does. It's too bad we don't see him as much as we used to, because he is very skilled. Like the stuff that you would see like when he would you know, do cone heads, or I think he even did some of that in Tommy Boy, or what's another one where he does that? Ghostbusters. I can't believe I couldn't think of Ghostbusters. So yeah, I just love that about him. Like growing up, Tom Hanks was definitely my favorite character. I mean, he probably still is, but I really appreciate Dan Aykroyd in this movie much more than I did when I was younger. And I don't know if you can see Tom Hanks's skill in this movie. Again, I loved him when I was a kid, still do today in this movie, but he mostly just speaks in quips. He just responds to everything that Dan Aykroyd is doing. Dan Aykroyd will do something very nerdy or by the book, and then Tom Hanks has something funny to say about it, like make fun of him. And that, I mean, those lines are funny, but he really doesn't add much to the story other than maybe helping Dan Aykroyd become a looser individual, you know, just like less uptight, you know. And I think where he is showing his skill, but it's subtle, you gotta watch it in his expressions and the way he moves. There's a part where he's, you know, acting like Freddy Krueger, and that part stuck with me from like the very first time I saw it. Always remembered it. There's like dancing in it, which I guess this dance was created by Dan Aykroyd, but you know, both of them are very funny when they're doing it. But just look at everything Tom Hanks is doing with his face and subtle movements in the movie, because I think he realized my part in this movie is just quips. I need to make this a little bit more interesting. And he does so with his movements. It reminds me of, again, when Paul was talking about, well, wait, did he talk about this? I don't think he mentioned this. We talked about it in the comments section. But anyway, when Tom Hanks at the end of The Burbs is sort of sliding down the front porch steps, like that, how did he do that? That is an only Tom Hanks thing, an only early Tom Hanks comedy actor thing, and he's doing a lot of that stuff in Dragnet, and I think that is where the skill is found. But initially I don't think you would see it. You kind of have to, I feel like you almost have to search for it, because you're laughing at the quips and you may not be seeing what's going on in those subtle movements, but those are good. And maybe I just love Tom Hanks so much, so I'm just, you know, trying to beef up the role because I'm biased, but I don't know. I think he's fantastic. And also, Tom Hanks is really different than we, I guess, have come to know him. Like Paul had said in his review of The Burbs, how Tom Hanks is sort of like America's dad, or, I don't know, grandpa, maybe, depending on your age. And, you know, we sort of see him as this clean, nicest guy in Hollywood sort of way. And he's not, like, mean in this movie, but he has a sexual appetite, which is rare for his movies. And it's just really funny to see some of the motions he does, and just some of the things he says, the way he reacts to certain things, the suggestions he makes. It's just not what we are used to seeing from Tom Hanks, but it's a lot of fun to see him sort of be a horn dog, I guess. And this film, sort of getting into plot here, is perfectly nestled in the time of satanic panic, like from the 80s and early 90s when all that was going on. Heavily relies on that fear that was happening in the world, or at least in America. And so, you know, they're on the search for this cult leader. And I hope I'm not giving too much away. I think it's revealed early enough to where I'm not. But Christopher Plummer is the cult leader. And when I think of Christopher Plummer, I think of a dramatic actor, right? Out of this movie, I don't know him in much. I don't know him in comedy films other than this movie. And I think he also, similar to Tom Hanks, realized I don't have much to do in this movie. This is very much Dan Aykroyd's movie. So I'm going to have to make this character special in some way in order to stand out. So I'm going to give him a unique laugh. And that laugh, watching Christopher Plummer do that laugh, is a sight to behold. I think it cracks me up anyway. I think it's fantastic, and I just love seeing Christopher Plummer in this. But with this movie, I can recognize it's not, top of the line cinema or anything like that, but I like that. It has car chases that are extremely cliche, like cars are running into gondolas and markets, and they don't run into two people holding up a pane of glass, but you're sort of expecting to see something like that. It's just very extremely cliche, but it works for a movie like this. I think the level of humor that's happening is, you know, perfect for a family movie, even with some of the content that you are getting in it may be a bit mature, but it may go over kids' heads like it did mine. I like that the movie uses a practical opening title sequence. It's basically a badge that we're looking at, but if that were done today, it would be CGI. So I love that we're looking at what it was. I don't know what, I've never seen the prop, but I'm sure it was like a giant badge that they made, and it's just a bunch of close-ups moving around. It takes too long, but it's, I don't know, it's really nice. I like that we're looking at practical effects there. And even though it does sort of step away from the show's origins of realism and drama, I do like that it, you know, it is like basically a canon sequel with Dan Aykroyd, you know, playing Friday's nephew. I like the opening. It has narration just like the television show had. I used to watch the 60s television show at my grandparents' house on Nickelodeon. I don't know if they still do this anymore. They might, but that, like, late at night, they would have old black and white television shows on, right? And Dragnet was one of them, and I would always watch that with my grandparents. So I always had an awareness of, I can't remember if I watched the show first or the movie first, but I've always had like an awareness of the two, and the way the movie begins and the way the movie ends is just in line with everything that happened on the Dragnet television show that I watched in the 60s, the color one. So I love all the tips of the hat and all the homage paid to the original show. It was, I think, a very kind and nice thing to do, especially since it tips so much farther into comedy than the show ever did. There's still really strong ties. One extremely different thing, though, is Tom Hanks and Dan Aykroyd rap a theme song. They create a theme song. In the end credits, they are rapping. Make sure you listen to the whole thing. Just love it, enjoy it. It is fantastic. This guy right here, two-time Oscar winner, is rapping in your face just like Woody in Toy Story when he's like freaking out. He's kind of using that voice, right? And it is awful. It's perfect. It's fantastic. It's amazing. It's what you need to hear. I can't believe they're doing this. I can't believe they did this. It's all of those things sort of rolled up into one. And the best part is the person in charge of this movie, the director of this movie, is Mank's nephew. The person who wrote Citizen Kane, that person's nephew made this. So yeah, I like Dragnet. I hope you did too, Paul, because I don't know how this is going to fit into your video, but I think it'll be, I don't know, I'm over here gushing over the movie, and if you hated it, found it awful, terrible, and abhorrent, I don't know, I mean, maybe that will make for interesting content, interesting internet stuff. But yeah, thank you so much for inviting me on again. I really appreciate it. And thanks for watching the movie. That's really cool. It means a lot. So thanks again.
Well, you're making me blush here, Mr. Pure Hangout. Thank you for showing up on the show. I really like Pure Hangout's takes because I find Pure Hangout knows so much about the background, and he's a bit older than me too. And I feel like he gives me a bit of that much-needed context, especially what he did just now, by the way. That whole satanic panic thing is something that didn't cross my mind when I was watching this movie. And, yeah, just like a couple of the contexts going on here. That little Mank trivia at the end, beaut. But yeah, I didn't hate this movie. Don't worry. I didn't waste my time. I got some good laughs. I think I woke up my roommates at a certain point. I was laughing so hard. It's kind of like disappointing to me that I wish that first half was stretched out over the whole movie. But other than that, listen, it's a fun time, and you're right, this is the kind of movie you would watch with a family, even if there's some obscene content in it, some porn stars and stuff like that. It doesn't matter, that shit flies over your head when you're a kid. But yeah, that to me is like a family movie. This movie is a family movie. Thank you, Pure Hangout, for showing up on the channel. Guys, I suggest you subscribe to Pure Hangout. He's really funny, and I really like his takes on movies. Link down below to Pure Hangout's channel. Other than that, I'll see you folks around. Stay tuned for more commenter recommended movies.
Just the facts, man.